HeatGrid is HeatGrid Ireland. Their main aim is to accelerate and roll out district heating projects in Ireland through their delivery model, which is to fund, design, build, and operate low carbon efficiency heat networks. And Sean Harty here is the lead solutions engineer there. And his role is to find and develop potential district heating networks in Ireland by managing stakeholder engagement and discussing how the network will work between the stakeholders and how the system will work for each individual customer and integrate that into their current heating systems. So that's Sean. And with that, I will hand it over to Sean.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I'll share my presentation now. Sorry. Now, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah, so I suppose there's a little bit on HeatGrid Ireland at the end, so thank you for the introduction, but I'll follow a little bit more about what HeatGrid do kind of at the end of the presentation. I suppose this is a very quick introduction in 20 minutes to district heating and district heating in the Irish space as well, along with a bit of history of district heating. So today I'm going to cover very quickly an introduction to district heating and exactly what it is, a history of district heating in a European context, then district heating in the Irish space, a breakdown of how we would typically develop a network, the policy and roadblocks to development, and then a small kind of bit on HeatGrid and what our role is within the district heating space in Ireland and Northern Ireland as well. So I suppose what is a district heating network? So district heating is, I suppose, the clue is in the name. It is heating for a district or an area. There's three main elements to a district heating network, and that's an energy center where heat is either recovered and then uplifted and produced. There's a pipe network to actually distribute the heat from the heat network to the different stakeholders or customers. And then there's also the customers' buildings and how the heat network actually integrates into each building. There's nothing, district heating might sound a bit scary in what it is and its size, but there's no kind of black magic here. District heating is very much similar to a standard heating system. It's just economies of scale and on a bigger scale. So one of the ways I like to kind of describe to people what it exactly is the energy center is just like your boiler or your heat pump outside your house. The pipe network is what brings it into your house. And then the customers or the heated areas are your rooms or your radiators. So it can be broken down that simple. It's just that on a much larger scale. The benefits of it then and why district heating is so sought after, especially in Scandinavia, is that it improves the efficiency of the system. So you can properly size heat pumps and run them to a higher efficiency than you'd probably be able to do with a standalone heat pump. It enables more renewable energy resources to be utilized because of the area it covers. It means that multiple sources can actually be added and changed over time as technology increases and improves as well. It increases the comfort levels for the end user, so it is instantaneous hot water supply and it is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It reduces the thermal and electrical capacity, and that's probably an important one. So because we are actually managing a number of heat loads now, our base load is much higher and there's much less of a peak when you come to a peak load heating of a building. So we can actually size our heat pump based off the base load, which helps it run more efficiently, which is much higher now. And the peaks are much smaller, so they're much more manageable. And also through employing, I suppose, thermal storage or even peaker boilers, you can manage that peak much more efficiently than if you're looking to do a single standalone heat pump. The electrical capacity is probably a big one, especially for industrial size users. MIC and the electricity grid, I suppose, is causing an issue for a lot of people at the moment to get increases and get available supply. So what a heat pump would do is it would take maybe 7 or 8 large users. It would then produce heat for them at much less of electrical capacity on the grid than if they were to each do their own individual heat pump. So that helps, I suppose, the grid as well. Heat networks like this also are very good users of a variable supply connection, which I know DSB are starting to investigate a little bit at the moment. So because we have a large thermal store we can actually run the heat pump in the evening or the nighttime when there's a lower strain on the grid to help with that, to help spread that out as well. It also creates short and long-term flexibility. So you now have one connection to possibly 8 or 10 large users or even a city. So instead of each individual person having to change out their equipment when it comes to end of life, or there's better technology available, it is only one point of contact. So one change out can do it for everyone on the network in one go. In terms of benefits for customers, I suppose the big benefits that we try and highlight is on the delivery side, there's no need for an MIC increase on site. We will look after that. Because we're delivering 80 degrees LPHW, there's typically no need for retrofit in terms of fabric upgrades to meet 2030 targets, which is obviously a big bonus for a lot of customers. We take the expertise, the effort, and the timing out of it. So as I said, we will look to fund, design, build, and operate. So we are kind of a one-stop shop to do all that. On the operation side, there's now no maintenance, so they don't have to worry about gas boilers or thermal kit to produce heating. The expertise is minimized as well, because now it's basically you just tell the system, it's nearly like a time clock, to not oversimplify it, but you now just have to tell a time clock when you need heat or when you don't need heat. It comes that simple. There's no more trying to manage a heat pump when it comes on and when it comes off. It's I want heat now and you get heat now. On a cost side, economies of scale. So we can offer these projects at probably a much cheaper rate than it would cost to decarbonize to a standalone heat pump. And purely because of all the people on the network kind of sharing that load. There's no end of life. So typically for our district heating networks, customers would pay a once-off connection fee, and then there would be no end of life fee. So that's it for life. They just pay based on usage. Then it also takes the servicing out of their OpEx budget, and then it can give cost stability. So we will be able to offer cost stability over long-term contracts, and we typically look for kind of a 10-year contract if we were to own and operate as well. History of district heating. So I suppose people don't actually realize how much district heating is used across Europe. There's currently about 70 million people in Europe that take a feed from district heating. Copenhagen in itself has about 90% of the population that are using district heating feed, and has currently installed about 3,000 kilometers of pipework on that network. But Denmark, I suppose, have a long history in district heating, and their first district heating system was built in 1910. So they do have a bit of a head start on everyone else. And I suppose with the oil crisis in the 60s, they made a real pivot to promote district heating in Denmark. And I suppose that's where we see today is they're kind of the, I suppose, European leader in this space. Another network, just to give you a kind of background on a network called Edda. So this is actually from our Dutch sister company. So Edda is a city just about 45 minutes east of east of Amsterdam, east of Schiphol Airport. We currently provide 50% of the heat load to the city, and there's further expansion plans at the moment. As you can see, we're about to connect a data center, and there's other routes. The reason I put this graph up is purely to show you that how a district heating network would evolve over time through a city. So we started out with one energy center, and we now have 3. We have a planned data center, and that data center is actually located in Edda because of the district heating network. So it's actually drawn other industries and jobs into the locality as well. And that's not just for data centers. That could also be for large industrial or pharmaceutical plants as well that have a high cooling load that can see the benefits of being able to integrate with a district heating network. Bradford Energy Centre then, our energy network then, is another of our sister companies in the UK. And the reason I've shown this one is because it's to show how fast these networks can actually be developed with the right supports. So from initial contact with Bradford County Council, One Energy were building the pipe network within 7 months. So they were actually breaking ground within 7 months, and they are just started their energy centre about 2 months ago, and they're hoping to be heat on within 18 months of initial start. So that just shows that this can happen at scale, and also at a pace that Ireland probably needs to have any chance of meeting our 2030 2.7 terawatt hour target. Copenhagen district heating network. So this is obviously the kind of go-to case for district heating in Europe. And the reason I put these two maps beside each other is because it shows the heat density of Copenhagen and where they've actually currently developed district heating network. And the reason this is so important is, as you can see, anywhere that there's a heat density or kind of in the orange and up range, there is already a network in place. And the reason that's important is because this is Dublin's heat map. So Dublin currently has a small district heating network in Tallaght, the Tallaght district heating scheme. But this shows, I suppose, Dublin kind of under a microscope of where district heating is possible. And I suppose this heat map shows that it is possible for the majority, if not all, of the city. And there's also an extremely uh, good heat source, I suppose, down on the Poolbeg Peninsula as well, which is being developed at the moment, which would be great for the city as a whole. But it just shows how that network and this system can work for the city of Dublin. What happened in Copenhagen, it wasn't one network that actually built out over time. There was actually several networks dotted around the city, and eventually they connected together through infrastructure, and that's how the whole city now is heated off one, I suppose, network with three companies supplying heat into the network. So district heating in an Irish space. So this is our overall share of renewable sources in 2022. So as you can see, Ireland are bottom of the list. Interestingly enough, this is a share of electricity and renewable heat. And typically anyone who has high of one or the other also has high on, so if someone has high renewable heat, they would also have high renewable electricity. Ireland is actually probably the outlier in that, is that we've actually got really good renewable electricity. We're actually second best in Europe at about 51% of the grid. But we're the worst in Europe for renewable heat. We currently provide about 1 to 2% true renewable heat, which shows that Ireland has a long way to come on that side, and but also shows the growth potential that Ireland has. And as you can see, the EU average is 23%. So we're currently 10% below what the EU average is. Ireland does have a history with district heating. One of the first large, I suppose, communal systems was the Ballymount Flats, and the energy centre has now been redeveloped into the building you see here on the right. It was originally built in 1966, and it was the largest scheme in Ireland and the UK at the time. It used oil and gas, and it used to provide for 2,600 families at a peak, and it was actually had 200,000 litres of a buffer tank, and fed energy through underfloor heating. There's another one here that's not in the slides, but there's actually a small development down in Cloughjordan that uses biomass boilers to provide heat for a number of homes down there. And actually was lucky enough to visit it a few years ago. And it's actually a great study case as well of what can be done if, I suppose, people's minds are put at it. This then is Ireland's current district heating scheme with Tallaght district heating scheme. It uses two 1.5 megawatt heat pumps. It takes a feed from the Amazon data center between 23 and 28 degrees. It then passes through the first heat pump, which brings it up to 45 degrees as a first step. And then the second heat pump brings it from 45 up to 85. And it's then distributed through the network, which includes the local college, a few offices, and I believe an apartment block, or there's an apartment block planned in the next few months. And also I know they plan to hopefully extend this as well. So a breakdown of how we would see the key components to network development. So the first one is probably stakeholders. So have you got the relevant stakeholders required to actually develop a network? And some of the most important stakeholders in Ireland at the moment, and probably always will be, are local authorities and local councils. And the reason for that is there is no way in Ireland at the moment to currently apply for a license to open the roads to install district heating networks. So there is a letter of consent required from local authorities to actually put pipe in the ground. So that is probably the first port of call in terms of stakeholders. The next ones are obvious. They're your customers, so they're your heat users, or even better, potentially a heat source. So that could be a data center. It could be an industrial plant with a large chiller load, or waste heat through cooling towers, etc. The next after that then is the heat pump. So it's the type of heat pump you choose depending on what heat source you have and what will be allowed in the area. Then we would look at our energy center, and that's for planning and size. And that is all dictated over what the heat source is, what the heat pump is going to be, and then what size energy center we require. After that, we'd look at the network. So how we're actually going to run the pipework, where we're going to go, and who we're going to connect. And I suppose that all feeds back to the stakeholder piece. And then finally, the final step in development is the customer connections. So we would always go into customers' buildings, do an initial survey, and discuss how our system would integrate into their system. And typically, it is actually quite straightforward. A lot of large users or kind of large energy users would have a centralized plant. So it's about, instead of having a boiler delivering heat into a main header, it would be a heat exchanger. And also, I suppose it could be potentially the same for, when you get down to the residential sector as well. But that's probably the last piece on the network of trying to figure it out, because obviously changes can be made to that kit to allow for the district heating connection to come on board. So our timelines, I suppose, to deliver a project, and these are probably longer than we'd like, but we try and be we try and be as optimistic as possible, but as well trying to be sensible on it. So it would take about 3 months to collect energy data and do a feasibility study, and that's all that stakeholder engagement piece as well, and seeing who is actually interested in the network and helping the network actually expand and evolve. We would then look to initial design and grant application. And we do all of those first 2 pieces in-house in Heatgrid Ireland. We use very little, I suppose, external consultants at that point. We would probably see it's more likely that customers would bring in their own external consultant to sense check that district heating is a good viable option for them. We would then move to detailed design, which would include planning and then hopefully a release of funding. So I suppose through our funding model, we have funding secured, but some of these projects do obviously also require government and public funding as well. So that's kind of held up in that 12-month period. Once that is done, we would look to be starting construction within 6 months, probably sooner. But that's just to give, I suppose, a little bit of time in between the 2 steps to tee up everybody, get road open and license agreed, actually go through a plan of how we're going to build this and how we're going to deliver it, I suppose, in tandem with the local authority. And then hopefully within 24 to 30 months, we will have heat on. So that will be actually delivering heat to the phase 1 customers. We would usually deliver a network with a minimum viable phase 1, and the whole plan will be to grow and expand that network quickly over kind of the next 5 to 10 year time period. So that's building a spine network, hooking up the initial phase 1 customers, and then starting to expand the connections out to maybe small, medium, or even residential users, depending on what way the project needs to be driven at that point.
Sean, just a reminder of time. So you have around 5 minutes left, but I know you have a couple of slides, so just wanted to remind you that.
Yeah, no worries. I'll get through this last bit very quick. Thank you very much. So district heating policy and roadblocks to development. So I think it was in 2022, the district heating steering group was founded, and I think it was about a year later they actually produced the report, and it contained 11 kind of overarching recommendations, but I suppose the 4 that I've picked out is legislative and regulatory framework for district heating, to mandate public bodies to connect to district heating networks, to establish a centre of excellence for district heating, and to financially support the rollout of district heating in Ireland as well. A number of these have been, so the SEI now have Centre of Excellence for district heating, which is absolutely brilliant. I believe there's rumours of mandating public bodies to connect to district heating, or at least proving that it's not financially viable, but I think that's in the work. The new heat bill, I suppose, covers a lot of the legislative and regulatory framework around district heating, and also kind of touches on the financial support and the rollout of district heating in Ireland as well. Procurement is probably the biggest roadblock at the moment. So currently a lot of public bodies will use the OGP frameworks for heat and power contracts. Unfortunately, that's not possible for heating networks, as each heat network is unique. And the reasons for that is it depends on your heat source, it depends on your users, and it depends on the actual area. So heat is too local to be able to give a heat rate for district heating for the country like it is possible with gas or electricity. Because a district heating network in Dublin or a district heating network in Cork might have a completely different heat rate because of the heat available in terms of there could be higher grade waste heat to help reduce the costs for customers. So a new procedure for green heat supply contracts needs to be formulated, because typically companies like ourselves would look for a minimum of a 10-year contract, which is probably going to be causing an issue trying to get through this procurement stage. And I suppose we'd encourage people to, if they are talking about this, is to think through the procurement stage sooner rather than later, because it can drag out. In the last few weeks, I suppose the big news is that the new heat bill was signed off that I've kind of alluded to, and it kind of covers, the development and legislation of how it will pave the way for district heating to be accelerated in Ireland, and hopefully to comply with our EU directives and our to deliver the 2.7 terawatt hours by 2030. It's a big ask, and hopefully we can deliver as much as possible. And if we could do the 2.7 terawatt hours as a country, it'd be absolutely brilliant. Also, there was, I suppose, that the government are going to look to private companies to help and to partner and to actually build out Ireland's shared district heating networks, which I suppose is great news for companies like ourselves. And then the grant support, I suppose there's talk of the SSRH grant to be expanded to help with district heating, but the total value of that is yet to be confirmed. And I suppose it probably won't be confirmed until a new government has been formed. And then very quickly to finish up so I don't run over time, so HeatGrid Ireland, I suppose, set up by Dr. David Connolly, as mentioned, and it's a joint venture with Asper Investment Management. Asper Investment Management, we are their 6th district heating company, but their 4th current. We're actually their second Irish company, but their first Irish company is actually Invis Energy, which deals with onshore wind, and they've built a massive I think they built about 800 megawatt hours of onshore wind in Ireland and still manage about 600 megawatts of that. And then we also have a mechanical and engineering company as well called Heat Connect that's just been founded in the last 3 or 4 months in Ireland. And then I suppose the other 3 businesses in the group was the Swedish district Vasavarma, which they've since sold, but they have replaced that with a Canadian company. The district heating network, which is Energy for Elcar, who look after the EDA and several other heat networks, and then our UK district heating wing, which is One Energy, which are currently building Bradford and have been appointed strategic partner for 3 others as well, that they're going to be starting building in the next few months. And how we look, I've gone through this already, how we deliver a network, but it's very much that we develop it, we identify sites, we do feasibility studies, we secure planning and licenses, and we try and get contracts in place. We fund and construct the network, and then also we operate and grow it. So we can do the whole package through to billing, operation, monitoring, expansion. And that's the end of it. Thank you. And if you have any questions.
Thank you, Sean, for the insightful presentation. And if you have any questions, you can just raise your hand, or if you would like to just put your question in the chat box, whichever you prefer. I'll read them out. Anyone with any question or any plan for district heating network in their local authority? Mick, you have.
Sean, thanks again for excellent presentation. I just have a quick question. When you commented on the high temperature flows of 70, and you kind of saying that it wasn't as important to do a fabric first approach. Did I hear that right, or was there a different context there that?
So yes. So a district heating network, we would look to deliver 80 degrees. And the reason we're looking to deliver 80 degrees LPHW is because a lot of the initial connections will be existing buildings. So existing hospitals, existing, prisons, whatever, universities, whatever it may be. So we can actually, instead of them needing to do fabric upgrades to allow for a heat pump to be installed to deliver 65 degrees, we will actually still deliver 80. So where the fabric upgrades would still be beneficial for the sites in terms of, energy efficiency and reducing their energy usage, we can actually help customers meet their 2030 carbon reduction targets by just delivering a low carbon heating. So it's not required in most cases to meet their 2030 targets, bar by connecting to the network. But obviously, there are still advantages to doing fabric upgrades where possible. I think the customers that will really benefit from this are maybe those who are inhabiting listed buildings, or buildings that for whatever reason, maybe the operation reason, it's going to be extremely difficult to ever do heavy fabric upgrades.
Okay, Donal, that's a great answer. Thanks, Sean.
I think Eamon also has a question.
Hi, yeah, Sean, it was a great presentation. Thanks. And I think Michael kind of touched on the question I had. Apologies, I'm joining from a phone. My laptop is kaput at the moment. But no, basically, my question is around, like, that's really interesting what you said around the high temperature and, the fabric upgrades and the trade-off there. So what is, like, has there been any studies on that and the cost associated? Because there is obviously cost associated with laying heat pipes, and I suppose that the plethora of issues you would have from planning to consents and people just collaborating together, and so look, I'd just be interested to hear if there's any examples of the cost differential per megawatt hour of heat output or whatever, as compared to a heat pump, and upgrading the infrastructure of the building. Has there been any case studies on that? Just a quick question. Thanks.
Yeah,
again.
so I suppose there have been case studies carried out, but rather than maybe point to a case study, I'll give you some, I suppose, real world examples of projects that we've actually done financial models on. We would see most of our district heating connections, whether that be from a low grade to a high grade waste heat source, cost somewhere in the region of under €10,000 per tonne of carbon saved. If we look at fabric upgrades, heat pumps alone, we would suggest would be more than that. But I suppose we allow customers, I suppose, to look at their own options. And it's probably the way we would like to do it, because at least they know that if they have an option on a heat pump and what upgrades they need to do, they know how much that's going to cost them. So we'd like to go kind of, I suppose, give our costs against that. One thing I would point to is, I suppose, the Department of Education released a document about 3 or 4 months ago that after doing studies on their school buildings, they would expect to decarbonize, the cost to decarbonize their buildings between 56,000 a tonne and 180,000 a tonne. So if we compare what we are looking at in terms of probably 10,000 a tonne and less, it's extremely beneficial. There would be a number of studies done, I suppose, in Denmark and across Scandinavia. Euro Heat and Power have one as well, that would say that district heating is the lowest form, or the lowest cost form of decarbonized heat if it's available. But as you mentioned, it's not as easy. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built here, and it is heavy infrastructure. It is digging roads, it is laying pipework and new pipework. So it's not an easy solution, and it's not going to be available for everyone, but it's available for more people. And I think it's available for more areas than just Dublin, which I think can be sometimes the idea that this is viable in smaller communities as well, if the right players are on board for a phase 1.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose you need a heat source, you need industrial partners, you need need a lot of and obviously the county councils will play a significant factor in it as well. Thanks very much. Great info. Thank you.
Problem. Just related to that, like, there is a question in the chat box. Sorry, Javier, I'll get back to you. There's a question in the chat box where Morgan Leahy from Clare County Council asked, are data centers district heating friendly as a waste heat source? And what are the options for towns with no obvious waste heat source?
So yes, data centers are a friendly source. They will give you a consistent load. So, sorry, actually, it depends on how they're cooled, if they're water or air cooled. So I suppose that's the first important one. If they're water cooled systems, absolutely. So as we see with the Tallaght district heating scheme, so what the trade-off there is that they're giving the Tallaght district heating scheme about between 23 and 25 or 26 degrees. What's happening in the heat exchanger is they're taking the heat out of that and they're delivering the heat back to the data center at a lower temperature. So it actually helps on their cooling demand and their actual chiller and air handling unit electricity demand, because they don't need to run them as hard. As I said, they're 24-hour, 7 days a week, 365 days operation. But they are a low grade heat source. So they are only at somewhere between 23 and 25 degrees. If you move up in the grades of heat source, you might have a large chiller load from an industrial customer that could be at 35. You could have someone that's doing a particular process that gives off heat through a stack. You could recover that at a higher grade. So the higher grade you can get, the better. So the higher temperature, basically, you can get, the better. And in terms of areas that don't have a good waste heat source, or don't have an obvious waste heat source, you can always do a large air source heat pump. That is always an option. And it's what we would, I suppose, look at as in our initial step, and then try and improve that by looking for waste heat sources on the back of that. So there is definitely an option, but I think anything with an air source would have to have, I suppose, good public backing in terms of funding as well to make it financially viable.
Thank you. I hope, Morgan, that answers your question. And Javier, sorry.
Yeah, hey, Sean, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. I just have a quick question in relation to the cost of heat. You said that your estimations are saying that you are able to provide a lower heat cost than individual air source heat pumps. Could you give more details on that? I think you have just answered that, saying that if you are going to create a district heating network with a big scale air source heat pump, you will require for public funding to compensate those costs.
So I suppose what you can provide probably more stable and a lower heat rate than a standard one. So there's kind of a few elements that come into it, to be honest. So if we just compare, say, an air source heat pump from ourselves as a base and an air source heat pump for a standalone project, which would be typically what would be used, the reasons we can run it more efficiently is we will have a large thermal store. So if we're on a variable supply from ESB, we can run that through the evening and then dissipate the heat during the day. So we're not at we're not at the peak. We're not kind of at the peak time for electricity generation. And also because the connection is so much higher, we can also make use of day ahead electricity markets as well. So it kind of opens the door to that. It also means that we can manage the peaks a little bit better. So rather than a heat pump having to boost it for that 5% where it might need to turn on an immersion or built-in electrical immersion or something to actually boost the heat up in those very cold times, we can probably avoid that through our system. And then I suppose to take that further, if we find waste heat, so it really depends on how much you need to pay for the waste heat, and if it's available for if it's available FOC. So that then brings down the cost as well, because all our heat rates, before we would ever go to agreeing a heat rate with someone, who would be complete visibility on it of exactly how it works out and exactly what factors impact that heat rate, because we want to be as clear as possible, and as open as possible to that.
Thanks so much for that.
Okay, thank you, Sean, for your presentation, for answering the questions. It was really insightful. And without any delay, let's get into the second part of the presentation of today's webinar, in the community energy production side of it. And we have Michael O'Shea. We call him Mick at TEA. He is a qualified energy engineer, and he's working around a variety of national and EU projects. And his experiences in the area of residential heat pumps, training and capacity building, construction sector. And he's currently working in the area of community electricity generation and integrated spatial planning for Power Ecom and INPAN. So we have Mick. So I'll hand over to you, Mick.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I'll just share my screen here and give me a thumbs up. So are we in slide mode?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Mick O'Shea is my name, and I've been with the Energy Agency for the last year and kind of working on the EU project side of stuff. And a lot of my last year has been working in the community generation projects and dealing with the stakeholders and dealing with community groups, and specifically in this EU project called Power Ecom. And I just want to kind of a name call to other Irish partners in this project is So we got Greg Allen from Community Power and Gloria Callahan from TUS, which is the Technical University of Shannon. So I've seen that they're in the room, so they'll be available for some Q&A at the end if needed. Okay, so today I'm conscious of the time, so I'll try to get through this pretty fast. So we're just going to quickly, like, what is a renewable energy community, the targets, what does a 100% owned community project look like? The main point I want to talk about today is kind of the roadmap to energization and the barriers that we see from the Energy Agency point of view, and also from the EU project point of view. Then some suggestions how local authorities can help renewable energy communities. A quick look at the supports available, and some time at the end for Q&A. So please, can you just jump in when you need to tell me about the time, and I'll speed through it. So energy community. So there's a couple of, so the energy directives basically have stipulated kind of I suppose terminology around it. So I've just bring in 2 examples here. So the CRU would view an energy community, or they've taken it from, that is a group of active consumers who voluntarily commit to provide an environmental, social, or economic welfare by engaging in renewable energy generation, energy sharing or trading, storage or supply. And then the next kind of slide just looks at, if you have a community-led renewable project and you want to engage with ESB networks and you want to engage some of the supports that are available from the state, here are some of the criteria. So the projects have to have a maximum export capacity of between 0.5 and 5 megawatts. They have to be 100% owned by the renewable energy community. 100% of all the profits, dividends and surplus derived are returned to the REC, and the renewable energy community has at least one shareholder member that is registered as a sustainable energy community with the SAAI. Just a slight asterisk on this, where I suppose all the stakeholders that are engaged in this are currently waiting for the terms and conditions of the small scale renewable electricity support scheme. It was announced, in the timeline that is in Q4, we're meant to get those terms and conditions. So, you know, with a month ago and with the election around the corner, hopefully we'll get them very early in the new year. But the mood music is that they probably won't veer too much from this. They might increase from 5 megawatts to 6, and we'll see. But look, we'll hold out on that. Just regarding the national targets, like we've just seen there in the district heating. So we're specifically on community generation. We're looking for 500 megawatts by 2030. And like the last slide deck we see, I've just kind of put this ladder on the right hand side where we're only at the beginning of this. Like as of, if we look at kind of the medium large community projects, we really only have one at the moment in the country, and that's Templederry Wind Farm, and they're 4.6 megawatts. So, you know, we're looking at kind of approximately 100 more of those projects being created and energized, or let's say triggered towards energization before 2030. So, you know, we have very good ambitions, but we've a long road to get there, and you'll see now. So just this, the next slide is just a quick, you know, hats off to Templederry. So this is what a 100% owned community energy project would look like. So they have 2 turbines located in Tipperary, 2.3 megawatts each. They're operating since 2012. They've had to get investment of 6.2 million. Again, the timeline took almost 12 years for this to get the energization phase. There's, in most kind of, all these start with really passionate, maybe tunnel visioned, you know, groups of people, and there was 4, like they're kind of in the core project group, but then at the wider side they've got 32 shareholders that were helped to create equity, and they have decided, as you know, that their surplus revenues is going to support other community projects, which is again a great testament, and they're trying to improve the outlook and meet those targets by using their own surpluses. So just what else is happening? So in the last year, what the energy agencies found out, and this project is trying to help. We've identified other communities out there that are trying to do this. Try to do a similar journey to Templederry at a similar scale in the sense of the megawatts. So we have energy cooperatives, CLGs, RECs, and as you can said, we're working with these 6. But if anyone in the room has other energy communities that are aspiring for this kind of projects, can you please reach out to us in the TA and let us know who they are, because we'd very much like to get involved with them, hear their story, and try to do peer-to-peer learning. So this slide, really, I put this together with the hope of trying to kind of, I suppose, it's empowerment through knowledge, and it's kind of the roadmap to energization and the barriers they face. So in a typical community journey, you'll start with a sustainable energy community will be created. They generally have an energy master plan, and so in the energy master plan there could have been suggestions about a generation project. And if the generation project, I think that's really beneficial to have the energy master plan, but we need that core group needs to kind of start thinking about the vision for that project very early on. In my opinion, they need to start thinking about why we want this project. What will this project do for the community? Will the project's ultimate goal to be generate income? If that income is going to help our Meals on Wheels in the communities, is it going to help lower energy bills in different community enterprises? Is it about the legacy for the community? Is it about the targets? So I think getting that really strong vision will prepare the community and I suppose those the kind of the key people in the community for the journey ahead of them. Around that same period, you want to start looking at the sites of what's around. So if you're thinking about a rooftop project, or is it going to be a solar farm or a wind farm, starting to look at the land around you. And this is where local authorities have a place, because in communities, local authorities have land banks. There could be brownfield sites, there could be other land banks that will help communities get there. So just having kind of an early identification of what's going around, what opportunities are there. And I think once you're kind of, you say to yourself, right, we're in an area, we have possibilities of land bank. They're not fully fleshed out, but there's possibilities. Then it's kind of going to look at some of the 2 big barriers that we see, which is grid and planning. And barriers in the sense that they're barriers because they have money associated with them to get overcome, and also they have the time frame to overcome. So with the grid side, there's 2 great kind of, in my opinion, 2 great resources that are available. The ESB Network Clinic is one, which gives you very real, accurate and live kind of data to answer questions around your substation and the general grid infrastructure in your locality where the project is. And then there's, on a kind of a other scale, there's the county-wide grid studies. Now some of these could be a year out of date, so you might get an idea from the grid study, but then I would strongly suggest you try to get a link with the network, with ESB networks and their clinic, just to see is there more projects gone through the planning phase, or are they around? So it'll give you an idea of if there's a big red flag coming up against your project. In tandem with that, and probably around the same time period, we would suggest that you kind of try to go for a pre-planning meeting with your local authority. And this is probably where the local authorities come in to try offer that, to try give some kind of early guidance from the planning department to say, like, look, guys, your project has some good grounds, or it doesn't, or here are the things you have to think about to get it over the line, So I hope that kind of gives you a kind of a picture of this is what we're trying to instill in communities early on, is to try to go through this process, learn the vocabulary, learn where I suppose leverage you have in your community. You might have solicitors that might be able to help you. There might be people in your community that work for the local authorities. There might be people in your community that work for ESB networks. And these are all the things where you're trying to leverage and get some get some kind of a, you know, early kind of positive or negative marks or soundings about the project. So the next thing then is looking at what SCAI are offering. So SCAI have a really good community enabling framework, and there's a couple of things in it, but the first thing, I suppose, what's not on this, we'll come to it later, but they offer resources, and they build on that vocabulary, they build on that knowledge base you need to go into, and there's 9 great resources there that they outline. But in tandem with the resources, they offer these free feasibility studies, and so you can apply for the feasibility studies. You get assigned a trusted advisor, and the trusted advisors go through your project proposal, and if they give you the kind of the go ahead, you go down then to the detailed feasibility study. And it's great that this is all free. It's supported by the state. After, if you get green lights throughout this process, there'll be a couple of kind of trigger points. Probably somewhere along that first step, you will probably have to apply for the grid application, and that's where a bit of funding comes in. This is the $2,000 application to apply for ESB networks, a 5-page application process. So therefore, sometimes you'd say to yourself, where is the community going to get that skill set to help fill in the forms? And it could be through the trusted advisors, it could be through the local authority, it could be from their own their own core community group setup. So generally, none of the projects we have been personally working with in the TEA have gone past, so they're in the feasibility stages, but we haven't worked with anyone in the next stages, or the early and the mid and the late stages yet. And we're hoping that in the course of early 2025, some of the projects will be actually going into creating the finances within their community, and being able to progress the project through, planning and grid and design phase, and then be able to claim that money back from the SCAI. So we're in the TEA, we're looking forward to kind of supporting communities through this early and mid and late stage, and we're very much hopeful that'll start happening in early 25. But again, it's an acknowledgement to the SCAI that they've recognized these barriers, and they've put up supportive solutions and also monetary solutions to help communities on that journey. So just in kind of a quick in tandem with that, I've just put this slide again up. This is again just a nods up to the SCAI as well. They've got some very good support here, but this kind of shows the timeline. And now I have put in 7 years down here, because what we're learning from communities, the journey is long, it's windy. None of the communities that we're working with, bar Temple Dairy, have got the energization phase. So some are, they're a long way in this process, and they're meeting a barrier, overcoming it, having to pause, find a solution, overcome it again. So like some of the big barriers that they're facing, is going to be coming down to money, how to structure their community so they can access funding. And when they access that funding, then it's either getting it, basically get the funding, then access the SCAI funding, but also then trying to create funding further on to persuade finances to give them to them. So the options are at the moment is you're going to get a large amount of shares from the community, but some of these projects could be 7 million euros. Something like a 5 megawatt project. You're looking at that type of value capex cost. If you can't, trying to generate that much money from equity is very difficult. So you might be able to get some from equity, and then you're looking for a loan from the banks. And what's great leverage, obviously, is then the SRES. So the SRES terms and conditions, as I previously said, haven't fully announced, but they haven't indicated that they're going to be looking at around 140 euros per megawatt hour guaranteed by the state. So that's brilliant leverage then, for trying to get finance. Another consideration I'm putting, I know there's a couple of local authorities here, is it possible for local authority loans and grants to come in somewhere in this process? To get, if projects are looking viable, but they're missing the community hasn't got the ability to generate that money, can they reach out to the local authorities for, you know, some maybe kind of a bridging finance or a grant or a loan? And again, there is other options out there, you know, for financing. But just to kind of show you, like, this image here shows many stages, and we're asking community groups that may have 4 or 5 key members in the project to navigate this journey, stay with the journey, and have passion and drive to get through all the obstacles. So I think the more support local authorities can bring into this, the better chance we have of getting to meet the national targets. So just a quick shout out to some of the supports available. I've highlighted the TEA first here, but so again, TEA, using the supports of the Power Ecom EU project, are trying to support, or offering support and training for local authorities and communities. We're trying to handhold communities towards energization, and also provide training to local authorities that need, you know, I suppose to help them meet their ADICAP targets, and how they can support community journeys. So because it's a landscape that's changing with, you know, it's a landscape that I think is complex, and it needs, I think it needs an awful lot of positivity around it to try get there, and to try support communities and not make it so daunting. Also big, you know, heads up to the SAI, because they have done, you know, great work in this area in the sense of the enabling grant, the trusted advisor, the SAI mentors. So from, you know, your sustainable energy community, you have the mentorships, and then they can guide you through the enabling framework. And you know, and I think there's probably a place for all of this type of supports. And again, sorry, the last one there, the local development companies. Again, if there's just feeding from the room here, if there's other supports you think we've blatantly forgot, would you please reach out to us and let me know, and I'll put them into the next slide deck we're doing this training on, because I do want to try tip my cap to as many of the supports that are available out there for both local authorities and for the communities. So again, how do we think local authorities, specifically on local authorities, like, you know, community owned energy projects, they have local authority rates associated with them. It would be nice that local authorities can consider that those rates could be reduced or ring fenced for other community owned projects. Again, you know, looking at looking at all the brownfield sites out there, which ones of them can link up with communities that have established SECs in them, which ones could probably link up with SECs that have tandem with capacity on the network, you know, to see then, is there a community drive for that type of development? Again, what I talked about earlier, this kind of finance gap, you know, trying to get community groups to fundraise 100,000 euros to start the process, you know, once they get through the early feasibility with the SAI, when they want to try actually start, you know, going down the grid upgrades or the substation upgrades or the planning and all that goes with planning. It's all money, you know, so it's all consultancies and getting reports done. So, you know, how do we support that? And the last one then, you know, the technical support and the project feasibility, like, so inside the local authorities, I realize, you know, everyone local authorities is super busy, but they have the engineering, they have the planning, and they have the climate side. So there might be the knowledge in there to offer a kind of bespoke support for some communities. And this support is, I'm saying, it's going in tandem with the trusted advisors, going in tandem with the European projects that we work on. And I think it's just the more supports that come in, the more of a blanket we can put around communities, the better success we have. So yeah, I'll just, I know I was kind of conscious of, stop sharing here. I was conscious of trying to get through to the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Mick. I think you finished 2 minutes before, so you finished your presentation in 18 minutes, so well done.
Yeah, so sorry for being a bit fast, and apologies, but I know that the slides will be sent out to you, so please, I'll open the floor to questions. And also just a
Questions.
heads up that we have Gloria and Greg here. So if there's something I'm unable to answer, Gloria and Greg, please jump in if you feel appropriate. Thanks.
So there is a question in the chat box. What is the payback period for the project, the wind turbine project? So I think they're talking about.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask if Greg is there in the room and he can unmute himself. He might give you a sense of the finance of Templederry. Don't know if Greg is in the room.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. It's kind of like how long is a piece of string, because first of all, the grid connection costs, it's bottoming out on them. We got a grid offer for some of our projects back in 2016 that haven't been completed yet, and that grid connection cost is actually going to go up. And then the actual ordering of the solar panels. Obviously, we want to be well advanced before we kind of place that order. Now, the performance of solar panels are going up, which again affects the finances. But approximately 8 to 10 years is what we would be saying. But we can't really kind of bottom out on that until we're quite close to development stage. And maybe just to add from what Mick was saying, that there is a potential and opportunity for local authorities. One of the projects that we're involved in is in Claremorris in County Mayo, and the local authority are actually partners with the local energy community in that they had an old landfill site and on the edge of Claremorris, and they're leasing it to the local community at a peppercorn rent, and it's being developed as a community-owned renewable energy solar park of 5 megawatts. So it's a good story for the local authority and it's a good story for the local community. Hopefully we expect to get that built out in 2025, but we started that journey in 2016. So this is the challenge, to try and shorten the time frame for numerous renewable energy developments, not just communities, but from a developer-led process as well. But we're very much in the community energy space, and there is requirements on the government with the energy directives to actually promote community energy projects to try and meet our targets for 2030. So there is an onus on all of us, and including local authorities, to try and support communities in any way we can.
Great.
Thank you, Greg. I think Sean also has a question.
Yeah, it's more so a comment than a question, I suppose. Brilliant presentation, Michael, and apologies for making you speed it up from being a little bit long on my own. But just like to say the 7-year kind of timeline to deliver a project, I think people might see that and it might scare them off a little bit and think that is a long period of time. I would just like to, even from a private point of view, that's still a pretty good turnaround, and that's probably what we would expect to see for our projects as well. So I just wanted to say, like, don't let that turn you off. They're really good projects to be involved in, and they're something to be really proud of, especially when you get them up and energized as well. And I suppose what they say, the juice is worth the squeeze. So I suppose it's worth putting the time and effort into these things. So don't let 7 years scare you off, because they're really good initiatives here that Michael's run through there.
Thanks, Sean. Any other questions from the local authorities? If not, like, I just want to let you know that we have Catalyst on our website. Gloria has put the link there in the chat. So I would encourage you to click that link and check through the website and what are the benefits that Catalyst offers as part of Power Ecom. And if you have no further questions, I think we can wrap up the session. Mick, we're okay with it?
No, it's great. I mean, as I said, we're about 3 minutes over, so that's pretty good, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Sean and Mick, both of you, for delivering the session. And thank you everyone for taking the time to be here. And yeah, that's it. And keep an eye out on our website. We would update that with recordings, and I'll forward the slides as well. So we do post project updates on our website regularly. So keep an eye out. So thank you so much, everyone.
I suppose just say thanks very much for having me as well. And if anyone wants more information, please feel free to reach out to me. There's absolutely no issue at all.
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.